Good evening, friends. I want to say good evening, friends. There's no one here just yet, but as usual, we struggle to hit the exact time. We tried to do this at 7 on Sunday, just because S.O.S, 7 on Sunday. Stephen Manning here, Truth Matters, S.O.S. That should be up there. I don't know why it isn't, but okay, 1 second. I'm getting some funny signs and signals on the side. So anyway, welcome everyone. Stephen Manning, Integrity Ireland, S.O.S, and Truth Matters. Our weekly live stream on a Sunday at various times. Yeah, and thank you to those who may be watching this now for the second time. This is live when we record it. Occasionally we make a rare mistake like I did last week. I had to spend a half a minute apologizing for it later on. But anyway, let's hope it goes smoothly. Now today, the title of our, let's bring that down a wee bit. Great. The title of our presentation today, JABS, you know what we're talking about. JERKS, you'll find out what we're talking about, and Jeffrey Epstein in Ireland. And a brief look at the inside world of the Diabolicals. And it is brief in the sense that this is not a comprehensive look by any means at all. But the whole point of this is to bring up another topical story and refer it back to this notion I call the original principle, which has also disappeared from my screen. Normally I have it up there top right. For some strange reason, anyway, guys, we'll just move on with it. Now, I'm going to, before we even start, I'm going to flash up something here just as a little tester, okay? Now, this is the original principle model of society, or in diagrammatic form, of course. And it's one of the later slides in a collection that I'm putting together bit by bit. It makes far more sense if you've had to trundle through the previous 100 or so that explain what it all means. But I'll do my best. I'll bring it up, just make it a little bit bigger, just for the moment, so you get a little bit of a closer look at that. You go, my goodness, what's that all about? Very simply, believe it or not, this is a model of society that is based on the properties and of light itself, the energy of the universe, okay? And it makes absolute logical, technical, social, and historical sense, although we've never seen this model in operation, because instead of these collaborative ideas, we've had the autocratic models. But we're going to remove that for the moment, guys. We'll go back now to our start slide. And what's this all about? Okay, what's this all about? I don't well, actually, I was going to say I don't deliberately try to make everything rhyme and all that, but it just falls this way. It just so happened, JABS, JERKS, and Jeffrey Epstein. You'll see why as we move along. Okay, so first of all, we have this report, recent report, that, my apologies, guys. Yeah, I'll have to, evening, Nobby, nice to see you, buddy. Here we go. So the report was that with all the hullabaloo about the Jeffrey Epstein files and the reluctance of the establishment, and I have an insight on this in a minute, which might reconcile the conundrum between those of us who believe in Trump as a system wrecker and those who might believe he is letting them down by not releasing these files completely. I think I can explain that in a rational sense, albeit it's still unsettling and it's still sort of not good enough, so to speak. But one particular argument, actually I'll do that now before we go any further. One particular argument for the withholding of the details in all of these files, it goes back to one of the comments Trump made. Now, of course, there's always the possibility. Hello, Geraldine, nice to see you. I hope there's some, there's always a possibility that he may, because we don't know, I don't know certainly, that he may have been involved in some sort of improper activity that he's trying to keep from public view. That's a possibility, and it's the one that all the anti-Trumpers jump to straight away. Oh, he's not releasing these because he's implicated. Well, now we've seen a number of attempts to implicate him to issues connected to Epstein, and so far they've all failed. You know, oh, an email was sent by an unknown source that claimed, yeah, so what? You know, who did the email come from? If we don't know that, how can we give it any credence? Was the email written before or after this investigation into Epstein and after Trump got elected and so on and so forth? So far, we've got to, if we're going to be objective, we have to say, well, what other possible reasons would Trump in particular have for not wanting these files to come out? And one of the answers is simply this. He implied this. He said in the early days, Epstein was in everyone's dinner party. He was in everybody's backyard. He was associating with people all over the place. And it would be detrimental to those people who did not engage in any misconduct, but just by happenstance were photographed with Epstein or had visits by him or to him or whatever the case may be. And, this is, it's a reasonable argument, I believe, to protect the professional integrity of people whose, careers and professions might otherwise be ruined by the leakage of these files. However, I still don't like it. I still think I would rather that the truth is out. Then people like me will stand up for people and say, well, look, there's no direct evidence that this person A, B, or C did anything directly wrong. We must give them the benefit of the doubt. On the other hand, there is absolute evidence here that if so-and-so visited that island 10 times in relative secrecy and they've been trying to redact it, well, clearly there's more than a smoking gun here and it needs to be understood as such, I'd rather see the truth come out. But anyway, that's one side to that particular reluctance to release these files. But anyway, here we have, but what we now know is that Mr. Epstein, who, remember, and I got this from an article by Dr. Vincent Carroll. It was forwarded on WhatsApp, and a very interesting article, guys. If anybody wants to know it, you can private message me on WhatsApp or whatever, and I'll send the link over to you. But he basically pointed out the fact that Epstein had been to Ireland now, starting back as early as 2011, which, bear in mind now, 2011 was still 7 years after he was first investigated, and I think 5 years after he'd been imprisoned for, youth and sex-related offenses and prostitution and stuff like that, underage prostitution. And somehow he's flying to Ireland on his private jet at least 4 times that are documented. He's had meetings with Alan Shatter, and the senior civil servant, Brian Purcell, at the time. What were they doing? He's not an Irish citizen. He's not a politician, an elected politician. So what's he doing meeting in private with some of these people that we have long since found out are not to be trusted? And again, I just want to look into this phenomenon and give a possible explanation for what's going on, why it's happening, because unless we know what's happening, why it's happening, and how it's happening, we're very unlikely to be able to find a solution. So what else do we know about Alan Shatter? Well, around this same time, maybe it was a little bit later. No, it was only a couple of years later than this 2011 visit. And I was involved with the Integrity Ireland project, and over 300 victims of system abuse, justice system abuse in Ireland, who were trying through a few of the independent politicians to get the Justice Department to look into these claims of serious malfeasance by Gardaí, by civil servants, by barristers and lawyers, by judges, by, and so on and so forth. And of course, they set up a whole big hullabaloo to deal with all of this, those of you that remember this. And they basically eliminated every single case one by one. I think there was about 320 in the end get sent to them, including people who had died in Garda custody, people like myself who said, well, I'm being stonewalled and blanked by the system. I've been thrown in jail or whatever. I hadn't been in jail at that point. But, being harassed and victimized by the system and the people who work for the system simply because we're trying to tell the truth and so on and so forth. So every single one either got dismissed or we got a generic, yes, we've done a proper review and there's nothing more to be seen. Then we found out that one of the barristers who was doing the investigations was actually complained about in one or two of the complaints that have been sent and so on and so forth. So it was the usual thing, a big cover-up. But we also know that Alan Shatter, when he wanted to turn his hand to writing, wrote this novel, Laura. Yeah. And as the heading says here, 50 Shades of Alan Shatter, the steamy novel by Justice Minister referred to the censor. Well, you'd wonder, how does someone like Alan Shatter, a minister in the Irish government, get any opportunities to indulge the seamy side of things other than in writing a book? Maybe we'll find out, maybe we won't. But there's a woman who is now in her late 20s seeking asylum in Germany. This is in the middle here, guys. She was 13 years old. She told that she was trafficked by Epstein into Ireland for, quote, politicians and notable men. All right. And she was only 13 at the time. She was prostituted to so-called important people in Ireland. And the question is, do we really want to know more? I do, certainly. I see someone mentioned here. Oh, by the way, the comments, they won't all come up. Some do and some don't. On Facebook, they tend to come up. On YouTube, they don't. Yeah, I can see different people writing different things here. Let's see if I can make this work. Does that? It does. Look at that, guys. Files, smiles, they're all guilty by association. Bill Gates, Prince Andrew, etc. Blah, blah, blah. I'm sure they all knew he was a pervert. Well, I had an opportunity to respond to this article, and I wanted to draw people's attention to the original principle, which has disappeared off the top right of your screen, I'm sorry to say. That's the little logo, the sort of yin-yang, blue and red yin-yang logo with a white circle. So sorry, guys, I've clearly pressed a button or something and made it disappear, but I'll have it back for next week. But I try to tell people what's happening in context of this original principle, because wouldn't it be fantastic? Imagine being so knowledgeable about everything that as soon as somebody asked you a question, you could refer it back either in your own experience or to your database of knowledge and tell them exactly and precisely what was wrong with the situation or the question and what was right, that sort of thing. Well, this is what I'm hinting at with this original principle. I believe that if we have a comprehensive understanding of what it is, and it's relatively simple, folks, once you get into it, it's relatively simple. We'll do a little bit of that today. But the point I'm trying to make is, we look at this in context of the original principle, and you start understanding how certain personality types are more inclined towards evil than they are to good. And of course, hardly anybody fully understands those two concepts. They're sort of vague or blessed notions, and well, evil is just anything wicked. No, not necessarily. There's more to it than that, but it's all linked into this original principle. So let's see now what I had to say. Oh, have I got another picture on this one yet? Oh, yes. So this is the text of what I said today. I asked who was the author. I found out it was Vincent Carroll. So I started off a very important piece of investigative work that requires answers. Thank you. Sinead was the person who posted it. I hope you like your name in lights there, Sinead. One question and a couple of salient points, if I may. So question number one was, who's the author of this report? She later told me it was Dr. Vincent Carroll, who's another colleague. I don't see him very often. Haven't seen him now for about a year and a half, I'd say. But a decent man, authentic, courageous, outspoken, and stood up during the pandemic and everything, and did his bit. So let's hear now. So this is what I had to say then. So in the attached diagram, which I'll show you in a moment, a lot of you are used to seeing it, the pyramid diagram, about sociopaths and how structures work. In the attached diagram, one can see how autocratic structures are composed and how they operate. And yes, our so-called democracy or democratic republic is only a pretense of what it claims to be, simply because A, the political parties themselves are autocracies, and B, autocracies require the surrender of one's personal sovereignty, which means one's own morals, ethics, and principal choices, for example, in return for membership or collaboration with the ruling autocracy. Now, you have to think about this a little bit, guys. I'll continue in a second. I just want to make this point. Most of us don't think about this because almost all of the large organizations, associations, institutions, government departments, all that sort of stuff, businesses, almost all of them that we deal with in the world. And by large, I'm suggesting containing more than 70 people. Now, of course, there are exceptions that you can have small autocratic organizations as well, and crime gangs and all that sort of stuff operate that way. But the point I'm making is that large autocratic organizations can only function by denying you the right to basically be sovereign. And I posit that the original principle tells us that being sovereign is our birthright. So in other words, in an ideal world, and of course I know we're not living in that ideal world, but in an ideal world, we would be living in a world where we wouldn't need other authorities to be telling us what we can and cannot do, because the process of growing up in enlightened families and whatever education that we'd be surrounded by would be so fruitful and so productive and so wholesome and comprehensive that by the time we reached adulthood, we would be ready to step into our birthright, as I've said, as children of light. I know we're not living in that world right now, guys, but it's not utopian thinking. Well, I suppose technically it is, but it doesn't mean that utopia is out of reach. It's actually our destiny, guys. We're going to get there one day. In the meantime, though, we have to trundle through the halls of hell. And first, we have to understand that we're in the halls of hell, okay? So the point I was making is that autocracies, whether it be Tesco's, Big Pharma, the military-industrial complex, your local government, whatever it is, once they reach a certain size, and even before they reach that size in some cases, they become autocratic. The minute they become autocratic, the people who are operating within it or are subject to it are required to obey the diktats of the autocratic boss, ruler, overlord, whatever it might be, right, in order to benefit from the products of that business, association, or brand. Think about it a little bit, guys. It makes absolute sense. We'll have a closer look at this in a minute, too. So they required the surrender of your personal sovereignty in return for membership or collaboration with the ruling autocracy. This is why, when making personal promises on your doorstep that they know they can't keep, unless they are the one at the top, the single one at the top, right? All party-affiliated political candidates are lying. What's more, they know they are lying, but then again, that's what budding sociopaths do. They lie, they deceive. And again, it's no great surprise to find out that politicians are up there high on the sociopathic scale. It's the sort of occupation that attracts many sociopaths. And we'll look at that in a moment. Sociopaths being, if there's a scale of good versus evil, the good guys are the empaths, depending on how active they are and well-educated. The sociopaths and psychopaths are the bad guys, again, depending on how well-educated and active they are, okay? And that's the scale of good and evil. We have to keep it simple, guys. If we don't deal in generalizations, we can never get down to the specifics, all right? So, many politicians come to the doorstep, oh, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do the other for you. The minute they step into their chair in the Dáil or in Parliament or whatever, houses of Congress or whatever, they become subject to what's known as the party whip. There's a guy, you can think of him as literally having a whip. And if you step out of line, if you say something that undermines the authority of the party leader or the prime minister or whatever he might be, you get basically politically punished. Your funding gets withdrawn, or you get exiled to the back benches, or you're not allowed to speak anymore in public, or whatever it might be, all right, or expelled from the party, whatever it might be. But it's all about money and control. That's what makes a nonsense of Western democracies that end up electing autocratic political parties with an autocratic leader. It's not democracy, guys. It's a pretense of democracy to sort of elect another king type of thing, or another tyrant, although hopefully they're not all tyrants. But anyway, on we go, guys. FR33 DUM 43V3R. Good luck, sir. Thank you. And I'll occasionally make reference to one or two people I pop up on the side. I apologize if I don't catch everyone. Right then. So then, to continue with this this commentary, we ask the pregnant question, and what's all this got to do with Epstein? If you remember, I'm responding to that post about Epstein and say, well, simply put, number two, Large autocratic structures, such as big corporations, large institutions, and governments, for example, do not operate on an empathetic nor individual empowering basis. Instead, their goals and ambitions are to acquire ever more power, money, and influence, usually by deceit. That is why the highest percentage of sociopaths and psychopaths inhabit the corridors of power and finance. And what's one of the first things one gets bored of if one has sufficient power and money to basically buy anything one wants? Well, even a brief look at the history of corporate scandals demonstrates that the next and hugely important part of the currency of power and wealth is sex on tap. Okay, we're going to go to the next slide, guys. If it'll come for me. Oh, it's there. There it is. Sex on tap. And almost always for powerful men. Okay? So, again, guys, not to belabor the point too much, but, I mean, we've seen plenty of movies. I saw one just the other night, actually, about, what was it, Rupert Murdoch's business empire, you know, a news empire, and he had a guy in charge called Ames or Ailes, Roger, I can't remember. Anyway, he was just another like Harvey Weinstein and others who exploit their position of power and authority or influence as the boss to basically harass and intimidate younger, attractive female employees into, you know, unwilling sexual activity, let's say. Okay, and it's happening all the time. You see, that's the problem, guys. We don't fully understand this, and of course the powers that be will cover these scandals up if they possibly can, because it ends up implicating them all. The more of it that we hear, you know. So if you've already got all the money and power that you need in the world, right, one of the first things, right, so it doesn't take a huge stretch for the imagination to envision a situation where even if one is not already a pervert or a pedophile, the idea of indulging one's power, wealth, and impunity by indulging in covert criminality, such as open cocaine taking on a train, for example, that was by Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, and what's his name, Merz, you know, all top big boys, right? Or in unchecked criminal insider trading by people like Nancy Pelosi in the UK, in the USA, Rishi Sunak in the UK with the vaccines, von der Leyen the same with the vaccines, Bourla, the head of Pfizer, etc. Or as we've seen with the Epstein case, where even supposedly untouchable royals, such as Prince Andrew, feel the need to indulge in risky criminal sexual behavior. Well, is it any great surprise that the purveyor of these diabolical treats, Jeffrey Epstein, would come and visit the leading politicians in arguably the most morally, socially, and politically corrupt country in Europe? Now, before I lose all of the Irish patriots who desperately want to believe in our culture and in our people and all the rest of it, I am, of course, implying that it's the strata of the so-called elites at the top that are guilty of this wholesale corruption. And I think the point is proven. The more you expose yourself to genuine news, the less you can contradict that statement. Now, you might say, Ireland's not that corrupt, surely. Well, there's the finishing paragraph here. Let's bring that up for you guys. And before anyone points out that Ukraine, for example, supposedly holds that top corruption slot, remember the recent scandal, hundreds of millions, or was it billions, going missing, all of the funds, the taxpayer funds that have been shipped into Ukraine to supposedly fund their defense, whilst all of the big boys, BlackRock, Vanguard, Free State, or is it Free State? I think so, or Stateside, all these big boys all line up for the contracts to rebuild the country after they've invested billions, of course, in the war machine and all the rest of it. You know, there are people making money out of this conflict, of course there is. And then we hear Zelensky's top man, his staff, his chief staffer, who he knew when he was an actor in TV, pretending to be a president, that he had installed a solid gold toilet. As one Irish Whig said, he said, so don't forget our, what was it, 300,000 or 30,000, what is it, that bike shed? Ridiculous. It cost more than a house to build, didn't it? A bike shed up at the Dáil. It's completely ridiculous, but this is what they do. It's power, it's money, and it's sex, guys. Don't be surprised when the three get linked together in a figure like Jeffrey Epstein and then linked to Irish politicians. Don't be surprised at all. I'm actually a bit surprised it hasn't come up before. So Ukraine supposedly holds that top corruption slot, not Ireland. It's followed closely by Balkan states. Let me point out the fact that those countries are openly and overtly corrupt, whilst Ireland is covertly and secretly corrupt. The Irish establishment, in other words, the government, judiciary, the civil service, non-government organisations, so-called, the mainstream media, are just far more practiced and expert at the pretenses and cover-ups than some of our more obvious partners in Europe. In my opinion, it beggars belief that Epstein was in Ireland on legitimate business, other than as a ruse, if they say that, it was a ruse, to facilitate his real dirty business. We need to know, and we should not let them get away with yet another cover-up. Let's bring it back here. Does this me? Yes, it does. Okay. So, yeah, hope that point is made. I just see the next slide has come up. Ah, yeah. So, so based on the Jeffrey Epstein thing, he was clearly at the top of a system. When I say at the top, he was certainly, was the word respected, held in great esteem by a lot of, well, look, the royals, by a lot of industry leaders. Apparently he also met the American ambassador that night, where one of the nights he was in Dublin. He also met another business group talking, supposedly giving advice to, politically affiliated groups when he's not even a politician. What's going on? It's all rather suspicious. And I know that a lot of this, the Epstein network worked on contacts. It was all about introductions, being introduced to someone, sit down, have a cup of tea with them. Now they're on the file as well. Even if they do nothing wrong, they're also now at least implicated by association with whatever Epstein might do. So now, why will this not go back up? Oh, yes, sorry, my mistake. So here we go, guys, back to this same one. Now, today we'll just spend an extra minute on this today, guys, because this is key to an understanding of what is going on. So this is what I call the diabolical pyramid. If we start over on the right, guys, you just see this three-part process: concept, plan, and action. And if you think about it, every conscious thing you do in your life goes through this three-part process. There's a concept or an idea or an inspiration. Then there's a mental plan is made, and then you take the action. The most literal example of this is building a house, of course, as a part of just making yourself a cup of tea, where it's largely an unconscious process. But you do this, yeah? The concept, no, I'm a bit thirsty. Sure, I'll go and make a cup of tea, and then you do it. You've just followed that process. If you're building a house, if you try and eliminate any of those three stages, you're going to have chaos. I know, I've done it myself. I've started with a bunch of building materials and just started to put them together in a sort of semi-obvious fashion without having, first of all, measured everything out, put everything down on paper, worked out what materials I needed. There's going to be confusion. But first you have to have a concept. What sort of a building am I going to build, right? Then you build the plans according to the concept, and then you take actions according to the plans. It's very, very simple. And the result is an outcome. Now here, it's colored in black, blue, and red, because this is later in the series of slides about the original principle. The concept is now corrupted. That's why it's black. It would normally be white. Okay, it would be white, and then the white merge into the blue, and then again into the red as well. It's all symbolic. It's highly important, and it all makes sense once you fully understand the whole thing. So here we are. So if the concept is corrupted, then obviously the plans and the subsequent actions will be corrupted. Now, right at the bottom, this bit of text, if I can read it today, because I have awful difficulty sound. Oh, yes, I can make it a bit bigger. Okay. The outcome equals the manifestation of values, right? Now, values, I don't necessarily mean things that have value. I mean things that people perceive to have value, like, for example, power, sex, and money. All right. If that's your objective, all right, the outcome equals the manifestation of the values plus the real objective. Often the real objective is not what is advertised to the public. then a whole secondary system of deception, misdirection, and obfuscation is needed to mask the lie. And that's why when they're hiring people for posts that they tell the public are there to serve the public interests, it's often not the case. They will instead hire people, so I'll put myself back up here. Instead, they will hire people who are adept at obfuscation, at misdirection, at fogging the waters, at delaying tactics, at covering up for their superiors and seniors and colleagues, all right? That's what we see in many, many state departments, for example. The bureaucrats and the administrators have been handpicked not to commit to the service that the public are told they're getting, but instead to protect the system. So they have to have this skill set where they can play that they're being a proper public servant, whilst in fact they're defending the system. All right, look out for this, guys. Many, many examples of it. Okay, let's go back to that. Right, now, the other thing to look at, so we've got the three tiers, the government or the boss. Do you remember I talked about autocrats? All right, autocrats means a single source of power or control, right? The bureaucrats and administrators who align with the plans, of course, they are going to fulfill the concepts of their boss. So the government or the boss has a concept, and it might be to rip off the taxpayers, as it often is. So the bureaucrats and administrators then fulfill that concept by making plans to make it happen, all right? And then the employees, consumers, customers, the public, sometimes unwittingly, carry out those plans, all right? Either by compliance, in ignorance, by duty or perceived duty and all the rest of it. But here's what's interesting. How does promotion happen? Now, the fact of the matter, top left, is that the highest percentage of sociopaths and psychopaths are to be found in the offices of CEOs of international corporations. Remember I told you that the larger the corporation, the more likely it is to become corrupted. And what I use the term diabolical, because it's based literally on the story of Satan and Cain, believe it or not, this whole structure. Yeah, not today though. All right. So, yeah, sorry, a little noise going on in the background here. So I just lost my train of thought, guys. I'm very sorry. I'm just going to have to go back to this. We were talking about, oh yes, the highest number of sociopaths and psychopaths. That's right. So the CEOs of international corporations. Second is the legal profession. Solicitors, barristers, attorneys, judges, yeah. And this is not to say, of course, that everybody in those professions are sociopaths or psychopaths, but it becomes increasingly unlikely that a person can rise to the top of large international corporations, especially ones that have deceptive intentions, like, say, Big Pharma, right? Or many political parties and so on and so forth. They're not in there really to serve the people. They're there to serve themselves and their buddies. If they have deceptive intentions, then they'll use this model. They'll have a two-tier. They'll have a bunch of people that appear to be civil and public servants, but they're really there to serve the system, the institution, and their political superiors or whatever, right? So-called superiors, all right? So, so second is lawyers. Third, I believe, was mainstream media, the media personnel, and again, it's because of these type of professions. They tend to be very self-centered professions. It's all about me getting what I want. It's either my face on the camera, or it's money in my pocket, or it's the power to exploit others, whether it be, materially or sexually or psychologically. Anyway, it all starts to make sense, guys. I'll just put it up again. We have another few minutes on this yet before we move on. Yes, how do we get promoted? Well, basically, you get promoted through ambition, greed, and service to the system or the organization, as opposed to merit. Now, of course, in some institutions, you do get promoted on merit. But ultimately, if the people at the top don't believe you can be trusted to be loyal to them, you just ask yourself the logical question, guys. So you eventually end up with the worst type of people climbing to the top. Now, these structures haven't been around forever. In different forms, some of them have, different types of organizations, but it's mainly since the Second World War that these institutions have come into their own, guys. And that, again, also makes sense, time-wise and everything. All right? So if the values are inhumane, so-called values, such as money, power, prestige, greed, and profit, via dominion, oppression, exploitation, lies, injustice, etc., then they will be converted into plans. They will be organized and institutionalized into administrative and bureaucratic systems to achieve unpublicized objectives via mass deceptions, public relations, and social conditioning. And at the bottom, who are the people here at the bottom that are carrying out the actions? Well, these are obedient lackeys, sycophants, and servile employees, trapped in fear, ignorance, and or convenience, and or misplaced loyalty. So I'm not putting too much blame. We're all born into these systems, guys, but we do have to understand what they are and how they work if we're ever to realize, and I'm going to go back to it here, this model of society versus the top-down autocratic model, which represents all of the institutions around the world. And we basically drift in and out of these institutions, whether you go shopping in a local supermarket, or you're a member of the armed forces, or you're working for a big pharmaceutical company, whatever it is. You go home, you drift out of that environment, of course, but what's it doing to your essence, to your soul, as you might say? And I'll just explain a little bit about this before we go further, guys. At the very bottom, you're thinking, what's that red stripe on the left and the green-blue stripe on the right? Well, believe it or not, that is the light spectrum. That is the average range of vision of your average person. They see deep blue at one end, deep red at the other end, and the colors of the rainbow in between, basically. Okay, the reason this is important, because I told you at the beginning that the original principle, which is represented by that little, you see that little logo right in the center of the picture there, yeah, that is the female over the male connected to the divine. Okay, it's concept, plan, or action. Do you remember? Spirit, mind, and body. Deity, feminine, masculine. God, Eve, Adam. Air, water, earth, and so on and so on. And then we have also in atoms and molecules, proton, neutron, electron, and so on, fire and water. As you see there in the middle, just an interesting little anecdote, guys, is that the Greeks had a concept of a soul way before, and way before any religions were talking about it. They had a concept of a soul, and as the essence of a human being that sort of left your body when you died type of thing and went somewhere. That sort of notion, similar to our sort of current Christian sort of notion of a soul or the afterlife or whatever. But and they actually thought they could measure it, that it had a certain weight and all this sort of stuff. But their concept was that it was made up 50% fire and 50% water. Now, this loosely corresponds with the red and blue ends of the spectrum, if you think about it, okay? And the masculine and the feminine, as you see there in the middle bottom of the picture, that's a little man on the right, on the left, and a little woman on the right there. But interestingly, they called their word for soul, the Greek's word for soul was atom. Now, isn't that interesting? Because there at the very bottom in the center, I've shown you the proton and the neutron with 3 quarks in each of them, 2 up and 1 down, or 2 down and 1 up respectively, surrounded by the electron. That's the same model as the original principle. It's the same model as let's call it balanced family, where you have a loving father, a loving mother, bonded together by love. All right, a male and a female bonded together by love. They each have the 3 little things, the spirit, the mind, and the body, and so on and so forth. It all links together. And there at the top right and the top left, I've done my best, because I've only got limited software to do this. This idea that first of all, you're an individual at the bottom. You then join with another male or female, bonded by love, genuine love, that is, and then you start forming communities or families under the same principles. Now, then each of these communities or families is represented by these little star shapes and the big star shape in the center. All right, so the big star shape in the center relates to these smaller versions of it all dotted around. It's the best I can do. The idea is that we would have small intercollaborative associations without autocratic rulers. We may have sages and teachers and advisors and experts in various fields, but they wouldn't assume an autocratic structure. It would be a supportive, integrated structure like this. Now, I wrote about this in the Crisis Color Coup book. Here's a little, I don't know if it's backfront or not here, but crisis, color, coup, what, how, or who. At the end of it, it's all about how evil has become industrialized and socialized, human evil, and the consequence. One of the consequences was the pandemic. But the last chapter in that book talks about solutions and based upon this notion and this model, and more. Okay, so let's see how we're doing here. Another about 20 minutes to go, guys. Let's see, we've still got a few good souls in here. Let's bring it down a bit. Oh, sorry, guys. There's more people making comments, and I hadn't seen them. Good evening, T Wiki Ireland, wherever it is. All right, and Vaughan Malone, Lester, good man. Let's pop to the next slide while we're. Why won't it go? Here it is, guys. Sorry, I'm sorry. The technology is defeating me today. Oh, right. I did. I see it. I've just found a new way now of knowing what the next slide is coming, which will make life a lot easier for me instead of guessing. This one you see most weeks as well, guys. I'll only stay long enough for people to get a snapshot, but I'll make a few words on it. This is a 3-part scale. It's a generalization of the 3 main personality types in human societies, okay? On the left, you have the empaths. These are people who care about people. On the right, you have sociopaths and psychopaths. These are people who do not care about other people other than as a means to profit or exploit from them, okay? And in the middle, you have the apaths. These are people who, for one reason or another, don't care, have given up the ghost, are just lemmings, sheep, or whatever, the sheeple, whatever you want to call them, okay? Now, as you see in the way I've done this graph, if you take some time to look at it and read, you'll see at the bottom are the most uneducated and uninformed people, okay? Which means they are acquiescent, vulnerable, compliant, and obedient. These could be empaths, so they're kind, but they're also very vulnerable and very acquiescent, okay? Easy prey for con men and, people who manipulate them, And over on the bottom right, you see liars, bullies, abusers, and violent criminals, but they're at the low end of the education scale and whatever, and as a consequence, most of them get caught and are sitting in jails. The cleverest ones, the thieves, frauders, deceivers, predators, exploiters, manipulators, become, if they stay in the game long enough, actively evil people, okay? On the other side as well, we have honest, generous, thoughtful, trustworthy, questioners, and truth seekers who eventually, if they keep at it long enough, become actively good people. And of course, the two are diametrically opposed, all right? I hope that's nice and clear, guys. Let's see the next slide. As you've seen before, I hope this is the following slide. The first one was only the model, the diagram. It's like saying, you've got a left hand, you've got a right hand, and you've got a head. But unfortunately, society has got one huge right lobster hand and one tiny little, empathetic left hand. And it's not right. It shouldn't be like that. Balance actually would have evil out of the equation altogether. It does not belong in the original principle. Evil would be gone altogether. But this is the way the world is at the moment, and I suppose all you need to read is the very top up there, where the actively evil people have taken control of global institutions, of capitalism, of communism, of banks, nation states, media, education, health, justice and law, energy, food, science, and the professions. And the law in particular, many of you that know me will know that I've had a lot of dealings with the law in Ireland in particular. And you've just got to realize they're bringing in like 700 new laws every year. That's an average of 2 a day, not 2 a working day for a TD or something, which is about 2 days a week. Then it would be about 10 or 15, wouldn't it? No, but it's 2 for every calendar day in the year. An average of 2 new laws are brought in. The question is, why? Why do we need so much governance? And before you answer, because there's crimes and everything. No, it's not. No, it's not. You can't perfect society using laws. In fact, when all law disappears, that society will be perfect, provided we're all living in harmony with each other, of course. Yeah. You've got to watch out for this, for the creep, guys. Okay. The creep. No, just a quick slide of my books. You've seen those before to do with law. A few legal facts. How are we looking at time? I've got a Here we go. At least I'm learning a couple of skills here, guys. Legal facts and lies. Number one, we are not equal before the law. I keep hearing these politicians. Now, this thing with America just invaded Venezuela. Not going to talk about it tonight. I don't know enough about it. But not invaded, but they took Maduro and his wife, and they're going to be charged. Okay. All of these European politicians coming out and spouting, even and our Irish politicians, oh, international rule of law, and we're right behind that, and this mustn't happen. But you're all liars. You all know we don't have the rule of law in this country, you know. Nor, for example, actually, I just make a quick mention of it. Bulgaria just adopted the euro January the 1st. And it turns out that 51% of the population don't want it. 40% do. 51% said no. Someone's just gone ahead and done it. And I had a little bit of a sort of a small debate online today about that. I won't go into it now, but I made the point. Look, they want to join what's supposed to be a democratic union of nation states, right? We're supposed to be sort of a federalized union, but of democratic states, where the rule of law is paramount. And without it, you're not allowed to join, supposedly, although Ireland got a shoe-in, yeah, even though we don't have the rule of law. So how and why can a nation state be forced to adopt the euro against the democratic will of the people in order to join a democratic federation? See what I mean, guys? About autocracies. Okay. The legal profession and the courts are a franchise. They profit by obstructing the administration of justice. They gain by perverting the course of justice. Irish judges are politically appointed. The law is a government-sponsored tool of control. It is structured to serve the interests of the cabal. It is a perverse parody of transparency and accountability. There are no effective remedies to judicial corruption. The overriding objective does not apply in Ireland. That's the notion they have in English law, that court cases should be cost-effective, efficient, and fair. Ireland is a complete upside-down turnaround of that. They're expensive as possible. They are efficient, not inefficient. They drag them out as long as possible because they make most money out of it, and they're absolutely and totally unfair. Once you're involved in a court case in Ireland, the punishment is the process, no matter what the outcome is. You know, it's a disgrace really to democracy. I've only got a few things. Oh yes, very quickly here. Now this was about the JABS bit. I'll fly through this, but the CDC adds asterisks to vaccines do not cause autism. Changes messaging on the website. Okay. Now I listened to Russell Brand on this. He did quite a comprehensive article about podcast on this. The claim that vaccines do not cause autism is not an evidence-based claim because studies have not ruled out the possibility that infant vaccines cause autism. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm going to make this point here, guys. This is tomfoolery. This is gerrymandering of the words, of the concepts. This is manipulating. This is deception, okay? The CDC, the Center for Disease Control in America, has eventually had to admit that their previous statement basically that said vaccines do not cause autism and there's no proof to support that, right? The reason there's no proof is because they haven't allowed any of the testing to be done, type of thing, all right? I'm giving this a sort of very succinct overview, you know. It's playing, if they have a product, they want to market it, they don't want the inconvenience of having to test it. If they do tests and they come out wrong, they get rid of those individuals involved in the test so as to change the percentage so that ultimately they can sell what they want, and they're given then automatic, what's the word? It's carte blanche, isn't it? You know, they're giving immunity from prosecution from people who are injured or killed by these toxins. This man says it probably better than I. I'll read what he said. It's a beautiful day when every pharma whore doctor is panicking over the CDC updating its website and stating there is no definitive proof that vaccines do not cause autism. After decades of mainstream doctors crippling children and causing endless pain and suffering while destroying lives, they are now angry that they can't keep destroying more lives for decades to come. Vaccine-pushing doctors are sick, demented, twisted, cruel people who are ignorant and arrogant at the same time, and who feed off the suffering and death of children. Quote, medical vampires, close quotes. Pretty tough, guys. That's somebody else's point of view. I certainly would align with most of it because, as I've said in the previous slide, the professions were captured, right? They've sold themselves out. If they're not professionals, guys, they need two things to be professionals. One is advanced technical expertise to the level required. Number two is appropriate moral and ethical standards. All right. When they sell their integrity, their professional integrity for profit and go against the Hippocratic Oath, they're not professionals anymore. They're far worse than that. In fact, they're criminals. It's as simple as that. Certainly moral criminals, even if they don't actually violate the law. They know what they're doing is wrong. They're deceivers, etc., etc. And the last one here, oh yes, America still needs a COVID reckoning. Obviously, how and why none of the big names, Fauci, Ralph Baric, why haven't they been jailed? The Alliance for Responsible Citizenship invited this person to address the topic, can institutions be reformed? Remember what I said about the pyramids? At its annual forum in London last month. ARC, founded by Baroness Philippa Stroud and psychologist Jordan Peterson, a man I greatly admire, is a conference that focuses on the West's failure to cultivate its traditional values, honesty, integrity, Christian values, which provided the world with history's most successful societies. Compare them, for example, to, in general, the Islamic world, for example, and I think that's a fair statement to make, I asked the audience, why at this moment in history are we asking how institutions should be reformed, or if they even can be? For decades, we have been aware that institutions were failing. Incompetent, wasteful, and corrupt governments, biased and dishonest journalism, agenda-driven schools and universities, etc., etc. Sorry, that shouldn't have happened just there, but here I'll pop it out just for a moment. Yeah. Oh, I see. That's how to do it. Yeah. Okay. So, like I said, I'm learning as I go along, guys. Yeah. Again, the point being made is that, money, they say money makes the world go round. If we don't live with integrity, if we don't even know the reason for being alive, what's it all about? And this is what I'm saying, this original principle notion, if you understand what that's all about, you at least get a blueprint of guideline. And the first thing it tells me is, Stephen, you are far from, perfect. You're far from measuring up to the mark required. But there's lots of reasons for that, including the environment we all live in. There's certain things we just cannot flourish. They, spiritual aspects or aspects of principle and integrity and, culture that can't flourish in a society dominated by these diabolical institutions, because that's not their plan. Their plan is to imprison us forever so that we will never aspire to becoming the original divinely connected beings we were supposed to be. Okay, that's what this is all about. Right, so let's see now, what was the next slide? Oh yes, I just popped this in here. There's not many left to go, guys. Lies equals the currency of deceit. The minute that you hear someone lying, especially in official capacity, you've got to put them in the right category. They are the lowest of the low. Because why? They are Satan's salespersons. He was the master of lies. It's as simple as that. If we have to go to black and white, sort of right and wrong, good and evil, in order to clear our minds of what's going on in the world today, this is where you start. Are they lying? Are they deceiving? If the answer is yet, and if they're doing it routinely with ease as a career, you've got to relegate them to the position of danger and filth that they really are, and do your best to get away from them. Okay? The solution is to courageously confront and challenge with the truth. Now, let's see this. This way I can see what the next slide is going to be. Oh, yes, we're almost finished, guys. Who to listen to? I came across this website. I can't remember where it was. Anyway, watchers.ie. I just spent a few minutes on it. I've visited it before as well. Some great articles in there, all about the dark side, corrupt side. And I know people are saying, oh yeah, we've heard enough of all the problems and everything. No, we haven't, guys, because we have to hammer this home. How many injured children, let's say, do we have to see before eventually the hammer blow hits and says this has to stop? And enough of a hammer blow to say, and I've got to do something about it. Do you understand, guys? So even though some people might argue that I'm constantly pointing out things that are wrong, I'm also pointing to the solutions, yeah? And to how we're going to get to a point where we're not always tangled up in all of these problems. First, we recognize what they are, and we say to ourselves, okay, I've just come across somebody who is on that evil end of the scale, whatever it is they're doing. Should I or should I not marry them, listen to them, go on vacation with them, work for them, vote for them, tolerate them, denounce them, expose them, confront them, reject them? Because people are capable of change, guys. People can switch from the sociopathic end of the scale to the empathetic end, and vice versa. As a matter of fact, that's what the system is trying to do to all of us. It's trying to shift us all along the sociopathic scale to the point where we stop caring, genuinely caring about other people. Then we become easy fodder for these diabolical institutions. But conversely, with the right environment and the right tools and facilities, people who may even be in psychopathic and sociopathic professions, even at a relatively high level today, they can disengage and climb away from that environment and move to something better, to make a better world for all of us. I hope this is making sense. All right. So next slide, we'll just pop through the last. Oh yeah, who not to listen to. All right. RTE, that's Radio Telefís, the Irish national broadcaster, Irish Legacy Media, the government, or any NGO with ties to the government. And don't forget, 30,000 NGOs in Ireland, a little country of 6 million people, 30,000 NGOs, and nearly all of them are there to do the government's bidding while pretending to be, quote, non-governmental organizations that are secretly funded by the government, i.e. taxpayers' money. Yes, watch out for them. That way, the government can bring in policies by saying, oh, we've had a thorough consultation process. With whom, by the way? Oh, with this NGO, that NGO, and this thing, and then handpick, cherry-pick people from councils. And that's how you got your public. Why not use the smartphone, like I said? If we're going to have to have smartphones, why not use them to change the whole voting political system? We could just press a button on a daily basis. No, I don't like that policy. No, and it's registered on a website somewhere. And they are obliged then to respect the people's will. Great idea, hey? Let's watch how slowly that would come in, you know. Never mind that one today, guys. We're down to the last couple of minutes. Yeah, our rights come from God, not from government. There's your diabolical pyramid again, guys. Our rights come from God. We were designed and destined to be sovereign, unique sovereign beings who collaborate with others. And just before I pop up the last slide, we'll go back to our thing here for 30 seconds to a minute, back to this. So you see, the idea here is that you start as a sovereign individual, either left or right, male or female in this case, okay? And again, if you're mixed up and don't quite know what you are, this is problematic. I'm not saying that you should be punished or judged or disadvantaged because of it, but you as an individual need to understand, you know, if you're not aspiring to the best model of femininity or the best model of masculinity, you're adrift. You're adrift from the original principle anyway, guys. And I'm not saying it's your fault, but I am saying that it's something that you need to understand, and the people who either support you or judge you or detract, misjudge you even, let's say, or who accuse you, they need to understand it as well, and we'll all be a much happier place. But the idea is that, yeah, we become sovereign individuals, sovereign families, sovereign communities, and a sovereign world. And that's it, guys. Very last slide, because I think I've got about 10 seconds to bring this up. Up you come, buddy, to stage. There it is. If you need to find out where you can find other things that we're doing, this is it, guys. And now I have to find, here we go. God bless. Hope you got something out of that tonight. And I look forward to talking to you again next week around this time. God bless everyone.